Welcome to Passions Illustrated. Before starting the video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. The flash of the cameras exploded like a storm of light. As Isabella Hughes emerged from the Paramount Theater in Los Angeles, her red dress flowed like liquid silk as she smiled for the photographers. But Benjamin Morrison, watching from the front row of fans, could see beyond that perfect facade. There was something in her eyes, an almost imperceptible shadow of concern that he knew all too well. Isabella over here." The photographers shouted in unison, but Benjamin remained silent, his heart heavy with the secret he had been carrying for 6 months. The premiere of Isabella's new film had attracted the cream of Hollywood, and Benjamin, as president of the actress's official fan club, had privileged access to the event. To everyone present, he was just another devoted fan, perhaps a little more organized and dedicated than the others. No one suspected that his presence there had a much deeper purpose. "Mr. Morrison," a familiar voice whispered close to his ear. Victoria Hughes, Isabella's mother and manager, materialized beside him like an elegant shadow in her black Chanel ensemble. "We need to talk now." Benjamin felt his stomach turn. Conversations with Victoria were never pleasant, but they were necessary. He followed her discreetly away from the crowd and into a side corridor of the theater. "He's back," Victoria said bluntly, her words sharp as razors. "Marcus has started making threats again." Benjamin ran a hand through his brown hair, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on when he accepted the $5 million deal to protect Isabella. Marcus Reynolds, former producer and former friend of the actress, was a threat that refused to go away. "I thought we'd settled that," Benjamin replied, keeping his voice low. "The confidentiality agreement. Apparently $5 million is no longer enough." Victoria interrupted, her blue eyes so similar to her daughter's shining with concern. "He wants more, and this time he's threatening to go straight to the press." The corridor seemed to suffocate Benjamin. To the Art Deco walls of the historic theater, which normally fascinated him, now seemed like silent witnesses to an increasingly complex conspiracy. Back in the main lobby, Isabella continued her parade of smiles and poses. At 28, she was Hollywood's darling, tip for her first Oscar after a breathtaking performance in her latest film. The scandal that Marcus was threatening to reveal would not only destroy her career, but also break her spirit. "How much?" Benjamin asked, knowing that this question was inevitable. $10 million, Victoria replied, her voice trembling slightly. "And this time, he wants the money directly from her." Benjamin felt his blood run cold. Until now, Isabella had known nothing about the threats, about the money, about his real role in her life. To her, he was just Benjamin Morrison, the dedicated fan who organized events, managed her fan club, and occasionally showed up at the same events as her. "That can't happen," he said firmly. "I'll find a way." Victoria nodded, her wrinkles of worry momentarily softening. "That's why I chose you, Benjamin. You always find a way." The moment was interrupted by a nearby commotion. Isabella was approaching, her genuine smile lighting up the room. Benjamin felt his heart racing, as it always did when she was nearby. "Ben, how nice to see you here," Isabella exclaimed, surprising him with a warm hug. Her delicate perfume, a mixture of jasmine and vanilla, enveloped him momentarily. "The fan club is growing so much. I read your latest report on the charity events. You're amazing." Benjamin forced a smile, aware of Victoria's penetrating gaze on them. "Just doing my job, Ms. Hughes. I told you to call me Isabella," she laughed, touching his arm gently. "After all this time, you still keep that formality." If only she knew the real reason for the formality, the distance he struggled to maintain. Benjamin swallowed, feeling the weight of the envelope in his inside pocket. More compromising documents that Marcus had sent as a sample of what might leak out. "Isabella, darling," Victoria interjected softly, "you need to prepare for your interview with Vanity Fair." "Oh yes, Ben, see you at the charity event next week?" Isabella asked, her eyes shining with anticipation. "Of course," he replied, watching her walk away with her mother, her red dress like a living flame against the marble of the theater. Alone again, Benjamin checked his phone. 3 missed calls from a blocked number. Marcus, no doubt the game was getting more dangerous, and he knew he had to act fast. Leaving the theater, Benjamin plunged into the Los Angeles night. The city lights were reflected in the windows of the skyscrapers, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that usually fascinated him. But that night his mind was focused on a single goal: protecting Isabella, even if it meant diving even deeper into this web of secrets. As he drove his black Audi back to his apartment in Silver Lake, Benjamin reflected on how his life had changed in the last 6 months. From a successful marketing consultant who ran the fan club out of passion, He had become the guardian of one of Hollywood's most valuable secrets, and now with Marcus' new threats, he knew things were about to get even more complicated. Worst of all, he was falling in love with the person he was only supposed to protect, and that feeling threatened to jeopardize everything. He had worked for Benjamin's apartment in Silver Lake was his refuge, but that night it felt like a concrete and glass prison. Sitting in his office, he meticulously analyzed the documents Marcus had sent him. Compromising photos, text messages, and emails were scattered across his mahogany desk like pieces of a sorted puzzle. Her phone vibrated. Another message from Victoria. Marcus has arranged a meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m., Chateau Marmont. Benjamin closed his eyes, massaging his temples. The Chateau Marmont was neutral territory in Hollywood, a place where secrets were traded daily between its historic walls. He knew that game all too well. A ring on the doorbell snapped him out of his thoughts. Through the security monitor, he saw Isabella standing in his doorway, hugging herself against the Los Angeles night breeze. His heart raced. She had never been in his apartment before. Isabella. He opened the door, trying to mask his surprise. Has something happened? Sorry to barge in like this, she said, entering hesitantly. She was still wearing the red dress from the premiere, but her hair was slightly disheveled and her makeup showed signs of wear. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't from the middle. Benjamin quickly put the compromising documents away in his briefcase, while Isabella walked over to the panoramic window that offered a breathtaking view of the city. You have a beautiful place, she commented, her voice carrying a vulnerability she rarely showed in public. So different from what I imagined for the president of my fan club. Digital marketing pays well, he replied with a strained smile, offering her a glass of wine. Do you want to tell me what's bothering you? Isabella accepted the glass, her fingers brushing lightly against his. Do you ever get the feeling that your life isn't really yours, that you're just acting? Her words hit Benjamin like a punch in the gut. If only she knew exactly how he understood that feeling. Is it about the new project? He asked, keeping his voice neutral, professional. Partly. She sighed, taking a seat on the leather sofa. But it's more than that. My mother has been acting strange lately, more controlling than usual, if that's possible. And today, I found something in her office. Benjamin felt his body stiffen. What kind of thing? A bank statement, a transfer of $5 million to an account in the Cayman Islands. Isabella took a sip of wine, her hand shaking slightly. When I asked, she didn't know any better. She said it was an investment for my future. The air seemed to thicken. Benjamin knew exactly what the transfer was about. It was the first payment to Marcus made through one of his front companies. Maybe that's exactly it, he suggested, hating himself for every lying word. Your mother was always very careful with her finances. Isabella turned to him, her blue eyes piercing. Do you ever feel like you're living a lie? The question hung in the air like smoke, suffocating. Benjamin fought the urge to tell her everything, to free himself from the weight of that secret. Instead, he sat down next to her, keeping a safe distance. Sometimes people keep secrets to protect those they love, he said softly, choosing each word carefully. Isabella leaned towards him, the scent of jasmine and vanilla enveloping him again. You're different from other fans, Ben. You always have been. There's something about you, something familiar. The moment was interrupted by the ringing of her phone. Victoria. Isabella looked at the screen and sighed deeply. I have to go, she said, getting up. Thank you for listening to me. It's nice to have someone who doesn't expect anything from me. If only she'd known. Benjamin walked her to the door, his heart heavy with guilt and suppressed desire. Isabella, he called out when she was already in the hallway. Whatever truth you're looking for, sometimes it's better not to know. She stared at him for a moment, an enigmatic expression on her face. Before leaving, Benjamin closed the door and leaned against it, exhausted. His phone vibrated again. Another message from Victoria. Has she been there? What does she know? Ignoring the message, he returned to his office and pulled documents out of his briefcase. Among them, an old photo caught his eye. Isabella, much younger, standing next to Marcus at a private party. The frightened look in her eyes told a story that no one should ever find out. Tomorrow at the Chateau Marmont, he would face Marcus again. But tonight, alone in his apartment with Isabella's perfume still in the air, Benjamin allowed himself to feel the full weight of his growing feelings for her, feelings that made his mission simultaneously more important and more painful. The clock struck 11:47 p.m. when he finally got ready for bed, knowing that the next day would require all his strength and cunning. On the Los Angeles skyline, the lights continued to shine, indifferent to the secrets and lies that unfolded under their constant glare. The Chateau Marmont rose imposingly against the Los Angeles morning sky. When Benjamin parked his Audi, the clock struck 9:45. 15 minutes before his meeting with Marcus, adjusting his navy blue tie, he took a deep breath, mentally going over his strategy. Victoria was already in the lobby, her elegant figure standing out among the hotel guests. "He's booked a table in the garden," she said quietly. "And Benjamin, he's brought more material." The garden at the Chateau Marmont was an oasis of privacy, favored by celebrities who wanted to be discreet. Marcus Reynolds, with his well-lived 50s and impeccable Italian suit, could easily pass for just another Hollywood producer having his morning coffee, but Benjamin knew the true nature of the man sitting in front of him. "Mr. Morrison." Marcus smiled, his white teeth contrasting with his artificial tan. "I see you've brought Mrs. Hughes. Always a pleasure." Victoria remained silent, her hands discreetly clutching her Hermes bag under the table. Benjamin took over the conversation. "Let's get straight to the point, Marcus. What kind of game are you playing?" Marcus sipped his espresso before answering. "Game? No, just business. As you well know, I possess certain materials that the lovely Isabella would prefer to keep private. Materials that you obtained in a questionable manner," Benjamin retorted, keeping his voice controlled despite his growing anger. "The means are irrelevant, young man. What matters is the result." Marcus slid a brown envelope across the table. "Consider this a sample of what could happen if we don't reach a satisfactory agreement." Benjamin opened the envelope, feeling his stomach turn at the sight of its contents. More photos, documents, and a USB drive. Victoria paled beside him. $10 million is a reasonable price for eternal silence, don't you think?" Marcus smiled again. "This time, I want it to come from her. Isabella needs to know the price of her mistakes." "That's not going to happen," Benjamin declared firmly. "You're not going anywhere near her." How touching, the devoted fan club president protecting his idol. Marcus leaned forward. "But tell me, Benjamin, does she know you're in love with her, that every moment of your supposed fan devotion is just an elaborate lie?" The comment hit Benjamin like a straight arrow. Victoria gave him a worried look. "You have 48 hours, Marcus continued, standing up. "After that I'll start releasing the material. And believe me, I have some very interested buyers." After Marcus left, Benjamin and Victoria remained silent for a few minutes. The buzz of the garden seemed distant, unreal. "He's bluffing," Benjamin finally said. "He can't release everything at once without committing himself as well. We can't risk it," Victoria replied, her voice trembling. "Isabella, she couldn't bear it, not after everything." Benjamin knew she was right. The scandal would not only destroy Isabella's career, but also her soul. The photos in his hands told a story of manipulation and abuse of power that no one should have to face, especially not at the age of 19. When it all happened, her phone vibrated. A message from Isabella. "We need to talk. Something's wrong. I can feel at lunch today." Benjamin stared at the message, his heart torn between his desire to be with her and the weight of the responsibility he carried. "She suspects something," Victoria commented, reading the message over his shoulder. "Benjamin, you need to keep her distance. Your feelings are starting to compromise everything." "My feelings are exactly what keep me focused," he replied, standing up. "I'll find a solution, Victoria, but let's not involve Isabella in this." Leaving the Chateau Marmont, Benjamin drove to Griffith Observatory. Needing a moment to think, from there, he could see all of Los Angeles stretching out below, a tapestry of dreams and secrets. His phone rang again, this time a number he didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was familiar, someone from the past who could help. "Benjamin, this is Sophie Martinez from Cybersecurities. One got your message about that special situation." A thread of hope appeared. Sophie was one of the best digital investigators in the country, and more importantly, she owed Benjamin a favor. "Sophie, I need your help to trace some transactions and recover certain digital files." "Is it related to Isabella Hughes?" Sophie asked directly. "News travels fast in the digital underworld, Benjamin. Can you help?" "I can try, but it's going to cost." "Price is no object," Benjamin replied, already calculating how much he could raise with his investments. "I need it sorted in 48 hours." While he was finalizing the details with Sophie, another message arrived from Isabella. "Please, Ben, I need someone I can trust." Benjamin closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his decisions. Every move he made seemed to bring him closer to Isabella, even when he knew he should keep his distance. The love he felt for her had ceased to be just a complication. It was now both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. With Marcus' documents safe in his briefcase and a plan beginning to form, Benjamin left the observatory he had launched to attend to, and this time it might be necessary to reveal part of the truth in order to protect the rest of the secret. What he didn't know was that Isabella had her own discoveries to share, and lunch would change the course of everything he had so carefully planned. The Spago restaurant in Beverly Hills was the kind of place where every table told a different story of power and influence. Benjamin chose a discreet table on the terrace where the bougainvillea offered the illusion of privacy. His fingers drummed nervously on his glass of water as he waited for Isabella. She arrived punctually at 1 p.m., wearing a casual light blue dress and sunglasses that couldn't completely hide the dark circles under her eyes, a sign of a bad night's sleep. Benjamin stood up to greet her, noticing the tension in her shoulders. "You look tired," he commented softly when she sat down. "I spent the evening going over some old documents," Isabella replied, removing her glasses. Her blue eyes met his with a disturbing intensity. "I found something interesting about you, Ben." Benjamin's heart skipped a beat. "About me?" "Yes, before you took over the fan club, you worked for Cybersecurities, didn't you? The same company my mother hired 6 months ago for a special consultancy." Benjamin kept his expression neutral, although inside his world was falling apart. Sophie Martinez wasn't the only connection he had with Cybersecurities. That's where his history with the Hughes had really begun. "It was a long time ago," he replied cautiously. "I was part of the digital marketing team." Ben. Isabella leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I found records of significant bank transfers to a consultancy firm in your name at exactly the same time as you took over as president of the fan club." The waiter approached to take their orders, offering Benjamin a few precious seconds to reorganize his thoughts. When they were alone again, Isabella continued, "I'm not naive. I know my mother is hiding something important from me, something to do with Marcus Reynolds." Her voice trembled slightly at the mention of the name. "And now I find out that you're somehow involved in all this." Benjamin felt the weight of the moment. Every word from him now could change everything. He thought about the conversation with Marcus that morning, the threats, the photos. He thought of Victoria and the promise he had made. But most of all, he thought of Isabella and what the truth could do to her. "Your mother hired me," he began slowly, choosing his words carefully, "to protect her interests." Protect my interests or protect secrets? Sometimes they're the same thing. Isabella leaned back in her chair, studying him with a mixture of hurt and curiosity. "All that time, every interaction, every conversation, was it all part of your job?" "No," Benjamin answered quickly, perhaps too quickly. "The fan club, my admiration for your work, that's genuine." "Isabella, it always has been." Lunch arrived, but neither of them touched their food. The sound of conversations around them seemed distant, as if they were in a bubble, isolated from the rest of the world. "Has Marcus contacted you?" she asked abruptly. Benjamin hesitated for a moment. "Too long." "So that's it," Isabella continued, her voice trembling. "He's threatening to expose that night?" "Isabella, I was so young," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "So naive. I thought he really wanted to help me with my career when I realized his true intentions." She stopped, taking a deep breath. "How much is my mother paying you to keep this a secret?" "The money doesn't matter," Benjamin replied, resisting the urge to hold her hand. "What matters is that you're safe now." "Safe?" Isabella laughed bitterly. "I live every day in fear of the truth coming out, and now I find out that the one person I thought I could trust is also part of this elaborate lie." "It's not a lie," Benjamin protested. "Yes, I was hired to help protect you, but all I feel." He stopped, realizing he was about to reveal too much. Isabella's phone vibrated, a message from her mother. She read it quickly, her face paling. "I have to go," she said, standing up abruptly. "But this isn't over, Ben. I want the whole truth." "Isabella, wait." Benjamin stood up too. "Marcus is more dangerous than you think. Let me help." She stopped, turning to face him one last time. "How can I trust you when I don't know who you really are?" Benjamin watched her go, feeling as if his world was falling apart. His phone vibrated, a message from Sophie. "I found something. I need to see you right away." Quickly paying the untouched bill, Benjamin headed to Sophie's office in downtown LA. As he drove through the city, his mind was torn between Isabella's hurt look and the urgency of finding a solution before Marcus carried out his threats. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, Isabella was having a revealing conversation with her mother, and the consequences of that conversation would completely change the course of events. Over the next 24 hours, Sophie Martinez's office occupied the 20th floor of a skyscraper in downtown Benjamin found her surrounded by monitors, her fingers dancing over multiple keyboards while lines of code reflected in her glasses. "You won't believe what I found," Sophie said without taking her eyes off the screens. "Marcus isn't acting alone." Benjamin sat down in the chair next to her, still disturbed by lunch with Isabella. "What do you mean? Look at this." Sophie projected a series of emails onto the main screen. "For the last 6 months, Marcus has been communicating frequently with someone using a private server. It took me a while, but I managed to trace the source. Richard Coleman." Sophie turned to face him, Victoria's main rival at the talent agency. Benjamin felt his stomach turn. Richard Coleman was known for his aggressive tactics in the arts, always looking for ways to destroy the competition. If he was involved, the game was much bigger. than they imagined. There's more, Sophie continued. I found bank transfers from Coleman to an offshore account linked to Marcus. It's not just the $10 million he's demanding from Isabella, he's already received almost double that from Coleman. So it's not just about blackmailing Isabella, Benjamin muttered, the pieces falling into place. It's about destroying Victoria too. His phone vibrated, a message from Victoria. Isabella knows everything, she's coming. The initial panic was quickly replaced by determination. Perhaps it was time for the truth to come out, but on their terms. Sophie, I need everything you have on Coleman and Marcus, every email, every transaction, every. The office door opened abruptly. Isabella walked in, her red eyes showing that she had been crying, followed by Victoria. So this is where it happens, Isabella said, her voice shaking. This is where you plan how to manipulate my life? Isabella, it's not like that. Benjamin stood up, but she held up her hand, silencing him. My mother told me everything about Marcus, about the money, about you. She approached the monitors. What's all this data? Sophie looked at Benjamin, who nodded slightly. We're tracking the people who are really behind the threats. Marcus is just a pawn. What do you mean? Victoria asked, approaching quickly. Sophie explained her findings about Coleman, watching the expressions of shock turn to understanding on both mother and daughter's faces. Richard, Victoria whispered, of course. He never forgave me for taking the main clients when I opened my own agency. And I'm just the collateral damage, Isabella asked bitterly. A way of getting at you? No, Benjamin interjected. You're the main target. Coleman knows that by destroying you, he would destroy his mother too. Isabella walked over to the window, watching the city below. Why you, Ben? Of all the people who could have been chosen to protect me, why you? Victoria answered before he could. Because he was the only one who cared more about you than money. The silence that followed was heavy. Benjamin felt Isabella's gaze on him, questioning, vulnerable. Show her, Sophie suggested gently. Show her what you did before Victoria even hired you. Benjamin hesitated, but Sophie was already opening files on her computer. On the screen appeared dozens of detailed reports on Marcus Reynolds' investigations into his suspicious business dealings, evidence of his manipulations with young actresses. You were investigating him? Isabella asked in surprise. When you were just starting out, Benjamin explained. I worked in digital security for several studios. I saw how Marcus operated, how he approached young, promising actresses. I started gathering information, hoping to expose him one day. That's how I found him, Victoria added. When Marcus started making threats, I found out that someone was already building a case against him. Isabella approached the monitor, studying the documents. All this time you weren't just protecting me, you were trying to stop him. And now we can, Sophie interrupted. With the evidence of the Coleman connection, we have much more than just your story, Isabella. We have a scheme of corruption and manipulation involving dozens of victims. But the exposure would still be painful, Victoria argued. Isabella would still be. I survived once, Isabella interrupted her voice firm for the first time. I can survive again, and this time I'm not alone. Her gaze met Benjamin's, and something passed between them, understanding, forgiveness, perhaps something more. We have 24 hours before Marcus' ultimatum, Benjamin reminded her. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. Then let's finish them off, Isabella declared, surprising everyone with her determination. No more secrets, no more fear. It's time to tell my story, all of it. Benjamin watched as Isabella, Victoria, and Sophie began to draw up a plan. The woman he had fallen in love with was emerging stronger from her shadows, and for the first time since it all began, he saw a path to the truth that didn't end in destruction. His phone vibrated one last time, a message from Marcus. Change of plans, meeting in an hour, come alone. Benjamin looked at Isabella, now engrossed in discussion with Sophie about legal strategies. Some battles still needed to be fought alone. Benjamin drove his Audi through the streets of Los Angeles with grim determination. The meeting with Marcus would take place at the Sunset Tower Hotel, a place that carried its own stories of Hollywood secrets and scandals. Before leaving Sophie's office, he had left a sealed envelope with specific instructions. If he didn't return in 2 hours, they had to hand over all the material to the press. The Californian afternoon sun was beginning its descent when he entered the hotel's Art Deco lobby. Marcus was waiting for him at the bar, a half glass of scotch in front of him. Alone, as I requested, Marcus smiled, gesturing to the empty chair. Very sensible of you. What do you want, Marcus? Benjamin asked, refusing the drink offered by the bartender. Straight to the point. I like that. Marcus swirled the amber liquid in his glass. You know, I've done some interesting research on you, Mr. Morrison. Your obsession with investigating me started long before Victoria came on the scene, didn't it? Benjamin kept his expression neutral, although his heart raced. You didn't call me here to discuss my past. On the contrary, Marcus leaned forward. I called you here because I discovered something fascinating. Your younger sister, Ashley, she auditioned for one of my movies 6 years ago, didn't she? Before He paused dramatically. Well before the incident, the mention of Ashley made Benjamin's blood boil. His sister had attempted suicide after an encounter with Marcus, but the family had kept everything secret to protect her. That's what started his personal crusade against the producer. If you mention her name again, Benjamin began, his voice dangerously low. Calm down, calm down. Marcus held up his hands in false surrender. I just want you to understand that you're not the only one with something to lose in this game. Richard Coleman offered me much more than money. He offered me power back, and with Isabella, well, it would be perfect revenge against Victoria and a clear message to all the others. You're sick, Benjamin said, controlling his anger. No, I'm pragmatic, and now I have a different proposition. Marcus slid an envelope across the counter. Inside this envelope is enough evidence to destroy Coleman. He's the real villain. Here, not me, help me bring him down, and the stuff about Isabella will never come to light. Benjamin picked up the envelope, its contents weighing more than paper. Why would I trust you? Because you have no choice. Coleman is planning something big for tomorrow, something that goes beyond simple blackmail. Marcus finished his drink. He wants to use Isabella as an example to destroy her publicly. The scandal is just the beginning. Just then, Benjamin's phone vibrated. A message from Sophie. Coleman is on the move. He's just scheduled a press conference for tomorrow. Tick-tock, Mr. Morrison. Marcus smiled, standing up. You got an hour to decide which side you're on. Meet me on the terrace if you want to save both your sister and your beloved Isabella. Benjamin remained at the bar after Marcus left, his mind rapidly processing the information. His phone vibrated again. This time it was Isabella. Where are you? She asked as soon as he picked up. Sophie told me about the message from Marcus. Isabella, don't worry, I'm taking care of it. No, she interrupted firmly. No more people taking care of things for me. I'm on my way to Sunset Tower. Sophie tracked her cell phone. It's dangerous. Ben, her voice softened. I know about your sister. Sophie found the records. You're not alone in this fight. Benjamin closed his eyes, feeling the weight of years of secrets and pain. How is she? Recovered strong. Like I'm going to be. A pause, as we both deserve to be. 15 minutes later, Isabella arrived at the hotel, wearing jeans and a simple blouse. She looked younger and more vulnerable than her public persona, but her eyes shone with determination. Marcus is on the terrace, Benjamin informed her as she approached. He has information about Coleman. Then let's find out what that information is. Isabella replied, entwining her fingers in his together. Her touch sent an electric current through his body. After so long protecting her from a distance, having her by his side, facing her demons together, seemed surreal. The terrace of the Sunset Tower offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles, the lights of the city beginning to glow against the twilight sky. Marcus was waiting for them near the edge, his smile faltering at the sight of Isabella. That wasn't part of the deal, he told Benjamin. There are no more agreements, Marcus, Isabella replied before Benjamin could speak. Just the truth. Be careful, darling, Marcus warned. The truth can be more painful than lies. The truth, Benjamin intervened, is that you and Coleman planned this together from the start, to use Isabella to destroy Victoria and in the process silence all the other victims. Like my sister, Benjamin continued, his voice firm. Like all the other young women you've manipulated over the years. Marcus laughed, but there was a tremor in his voice. And what do you intend to do? Expose me? Coleman has connections you can't even imagine. So do we. Isabella stepped forward. Every victim, every story, every piece of evidence that Ben has collected over the years. We're not alone anymore, Marcus. The sound of helicopters cut through the night air. Camera lights flash from neighboring buildings. Sophie had fulfilled her part of the plan. It's over, Benjamin said simply. Coleman's press conference tomorrow. It's going to have a very different story than the one he planned. Marcus looked around, realizing that he was trapped. His empire of manipulation and fear was crumbling before his eyes. You don't understand, he muttered, backing away. Coleman will? Coleman is already being investigated. Isabella interrupted him. Right now the police are in his office. Your connections won't save you this time. Benjamin watched as the man who had haunted so many lives finally lost his arrogance. It was the end of an era of silence and fear. Isabella squeezed his hand, and in that moment, under the lights of Los Angeles and the cameras documenting the fall of a predator, Benjamin knew that some secrets needed to come to light before healing could begin. The final chapter of his story with Isabella was about to be written, but for the first time it would be a story of truth, redemption, and perhaps love. The next morning dawned with Los Angeles in an uproar. The headlines of the main newspapers featured the fall of Marcus Reynolds and Richard Coleman, a scandal that was shaking the power structures of Hollywood. Benjamin watched it all through the window of a Silver Lake apartment, an untouched cup of coffee cooling beside him. Shares in Coleman's agency plummeted 40% in the first few hours of trading. Victoria reported, nervously flicking through her tablet. "The police have found evidence of crimes far beyond what we imagined." Isabella, sitting on the leather sofa that had witnessed her first visit there a few days ago, remained strangely calm. "How many others?" she asked softly. 23, Sophie replied, her fingers pausing over the keyboard of her laptop. 23 women have come forward since last night, all with similar stories. About Marcus and Coleman. Benjamin felt the familiar weight of guilt. "If I'd acted sooner." "No," Isabella interrupted him, getting up to stand beside him by the window. "You do what you could when you could. We all carry different scars from that story." The California morning sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, a surreal contrast to the gravity of the moment. The last 24 hours had transformed their lives in ways they were still trying to understand. "Ashley called," Benjamin said, breaking a brief silence. "She wants to testify too." Isabella intertwined her fingers in a gesture that now seemed as natural as breathing. "She's strong like her brother," Victoria snorted, attracting everyone's attention. "The lawyers want an official statement from you, Isabella. The press is speculating, and we need to control the narrative." "No," Isabella replied firmly. "No more controlling narratives. I'm going to tell my story my way." She turned to Benjamin. "And I want you to be by my side." "When I do it," Isabella, Victoria began, but her daughter held up her hand. "Mom, I know you've always wanted to protect me, but sometimes protection becomes a prison." Benjamin showed me that there is strength in facing our fears and exposing our truths. Sophie closed her laptop with a soft click. "Sin is interested in an exclusive interview. No editing, no prior script." "Perfect," Isabella nodded. "But first there's something I need to do." She led Benjamin to the terrace of the apartment where the view of Los Angeles stretched to the horizon, the same horizon that had witnessed so many secrets, so many silent promises. "Do you know what impressed me most about you?" she asked, leaning back against the balustrade. "It wasn't your dedication to protecting me, or even your courage in standing up to Marcus. It was your ability to love, even while carrying so much pain." Benjamin felt his heart race. "Isabella, let me finish." She smiled, gently touching his face. "You built such a perfect facade as president of the fan club that you almost fooled me, but there were moments, little moments, when I saw beyond the role you played. It was never entirely an act," he admitted. "My admiration for you was always real. And now that there are no more secrets between us." The question hung in the morning air, loaded with possibilities. Benjamin looked at the woman in front of him, not the Hollywood star, not the victim of a scandal, but simply Isabella with all her complexities and strength. "Now," he replied, "we can start something new, something real." The kiss that followed was unlike any fantasy Benjamin could have imagined during his months as secret keeper. Was real. It was deep. It was the start of something that needed no disguises or silent promises. When they returned to the apartment, Victoria and Sophie were waiting for them with expressions that mixed relief and expectation. "The interview is scheduled for tomorrow," Sophie informed them, "and there's more. Ashley will be arriving this afternoon. She wants to meet you, Isabella." "I can't wait." Isabella smiled, still holding Benjamin's hand. "I think we all have a lot to share." The next few hours were spent preparing, not to control a narrative, but to ensure that the truth was told with dignity and purpose. Benjamin watched Isabella coordinate everything with renewed strength, and his love for her only grew as the sun began to set, marking the end of one of the most transformative days of their lives. Benjamin met Isabella again on the terrace. "Ready for tomorrow?" he asked, enfolding her in his arms. "With you by my side," she smiled. "I'm ready for anything." Dusk painted the Los Angeles sky in shades of purple and orange, a spectacle that seemed to celebrate the end of an era of secrets and the beginning of something new. Benjamin Morrison, who had begun this journey as a keeper of secrets, ended it as something much more significant, a partner in truth, justice, and love. "You know," Isabella murmured against his chest, "I think I always knew there was something special about you from the first day in the fan club." "Is that so?" he smiled. "And what would that be?" "The way you looked at me, not like a celebrity, not like an idol, but like a real person." Benjamin kissed her softly, savoring the freedom of finally being able to express his feelings without reservation. "It's because you've always been real to me, Isabella, always." The sun finally set over the Los Angeles skyline, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The silent promise Benjamin had made months ago had turned into something much bigger, a promise of love, truth, and redemption, spoken out loud for the world to hear.